Hello and welcome to the Crimson Misery Podcast, episode 2. This is a podcast about college basketball, but as you'll see in this particular episode, we have a little bit more to talk about. But if you are listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please consider rating the show 5 stars. And if you are watching on YouTube, then consider liking and subscribing, maybe even leaving a comment. And as always, you can hit me up on crimsonmiserypod@gmail.com. I am also on Twitter and Blue Sky at Will AJ Rainbolt. You could also follow the pod on both of those platforms at Crim Misery Pod. With that being said, just a little, we have a lot to recap in the college basketball world. Some predictions that some of them hit, some of them didn't. And we also have some other sports to talk about, especially with what happened last night. It is November 16th. So, of course, last night there was the infamous Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight. Question mark. And we also have some dumb tweets that we are going to be dunking on. Yes, this is going to be a definitely going to be something that's going to be recurring because there is a lot of gold out there that we can dunk on. So we can do that together, of course. But first and foremost, I want to ask myself, I mentioned this last time. Did Fran McCaffrey get a technical foul last game? And it looks as if he did not. They did get a win over Washington State. So there is that. There was no technical foul. Very disappointed. um, no, but that's going to be just a recurring joke that appears apparently in this show because I have nothing better to talk about. Honestly, well, because why would I want to talk about the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight? I mean, what is there to even say at this point that already hasn't been said? You had the terrible like 144p quality at some points. You had the Jerry Jones interview because it's obviously in uh, uh I almost said Cowboy Stadium, but I think it's like AT&T Stadium. God, um, you had the infamous when Mike Tyson turned around and you just saw his bare ass, just like assless chaps, and the fight itself, just with this like just. I never got like the nostalgia for Mike Tyson, right? I'm only 23, so I never like lived through the heyday of Iron Mike and just the heyday of boxing in general or like professional wrestling or anything that kind of stuff just never really appealed to me. And Jake Paul, I obviously like growing up, like especially as a teenager, that's when Jake Paul and Logan Paul started to become like really popular. And that kind of stuff just never appealed to me because I was always like I loved seeing um just people dunking on them traditionally. Like, it's every day, bro, with that Disney Channel, bro. Nickelodeon hit me up and I said hell no. Like, that's kind of stuff you meme, right? That's just sort of the thing where I was always like, I just don't want to be into this at all. So it just really, the fight really just didn't have any appeal to me other than like I kind of wanted to see like this 58-year-old man like knocking out Jake Paul just because he's an asshole. But that isn't what happened. I kind of like figured like why would like a 58-year-old Mike Tyson be anywhere near his heyday? And having just like had a bunch of like health complications too. It's like I don't like on the one hand, I don't want to like shame people who watch stuff, but at the same time, it's like people who are complaining like the fight's rigged. Betting on this, I actually should be compensated for free money, and the fight was clearly rigged. I am just so angry that this happened. Like, what the fuck were you expecting to happen in this like sport that is clearly rigged? I mean, if there is a silver lining, though, we did see Drake lose a lot of money. So he, I think, placed like something like I know it's only like $2 to this man, but seeing him lose like $250,000 was just like, just it's like screw you, Drake. Um, with that being said, let's move on from the just whatever the hell that fight was. I saw like some the highlights or whatever, but it just like why is this necessary in society to make this sort of fight be like a new norm of sorts? It just doesn't make sense to me. But at the same time, it does because we're the United States, and of course, this sort of thing is just bound to happen. Anywho, let's get to some action that happened. I know last time the podcast was on, I recapped some of not recapped, but previewed some of Friday's action in college basketball. I thought Florida State was going to beat Florida. That did not happen. Florida instead won 87 to 74. Florida State made it kind of close, but there just isn't. I really don't want to talk about Florida, especially with Todd Golden as their head coach, because he's kind of gross. He's very gross, actually. But we do have something that I did get kind of correct. I almost got the score. I actually correctly predicted that Alabama would score 78 points in the Alabama Purdue game in Mackey Arena. I predicted Purdue would score 84 points and they scored 87. So they clearly proved me wrong. They clearly just showed that I'm so bad at predicting scores, you know. Geez, Trey Kaufman ran with 26 and 8. He clearly showed that he can, especially in Purdue's front court, because I said on Friday that the loss of Daniel Jacobson is going to definitely impact their front court depth. And Trey Kaufman Rin basically said, especially against a very tall Alabama team with a lot of size, he's like, I'm going to just show him that we aren't missing Daniel Jacobson. I don't know why I put on this like Southern accent for Trey Kaufman Rin, but um, anyway, he showed up nicely. Braden Smith with a double double, 17 points, 10 assists, just continuing to just show his steady play. And CJ Cox, oh my God. He just went off and when Alabama was not really threatening to pull away, but just like seize momentum of the game and kind of put Purdue in the back seat. He just hit like just two massive threes that like he only had 11 points, but those 11 points were clearly like really good for Purdue. They came at a very good time. Caleb first made some big plays down the stretch, didn't only hit a field goal, but you know, definitely showed that again with the Purdue's front court depth definitely being tested and a guy that sort of looked like he was on, the outs with especially with the recruiting class coming in. People thought he may transfer, and he instead shows up. I mean, only 6 points, but again, they only won by 9. So again, those 6 points were pretty important. And I mean, Fletcher Lawyer also has just been shooting the lights out this year. He has just been so good. And Purdue, yeah, I knew Purdue would play really well at home, and I mean, there were a couple of like ebbs and flows in the game, but overall they were really impressive. And so my overall notion of Purdue being like the best team in the Big Ten, at least as of right now, like is holding up. But there were some surprises, and both good and bad for the overall Big Ten. And again, great win for Purdue. I'm would rather Purdue and any again. I say this as a rival schools fan, as an Indiana fan. Like I'm glad Purdue is having wins like this. I'm glad that teams like in the Big Ten are getting these early season wins. I wish more teams would play stronger schedules. Indiana, but and we'll get to Indiana in a second because they did play today on Saturday. So, but again, Alabama is going to be fine. Grant Nelson, Cliff Amori, Mark Sears didn't have a great game. 1 for 6 from three. I expected a bit more from him, but Alabama's going to be fine. They're going to be fine, and I guess the rest of the SEC will have a bit more of a challenge with that. A couple other just kind of whatever scores. Cincinnati beats Nichols. North Carolina beats American. Villanova losing again to Virginia. And oh my God. Yeah, Kyle Neptune. I'm sorry. Your time may be coming, man. I'm sorry. Uh yeah. And Seton Hall, they did beat Wagner. but they also did not score 60 points. This team is allergic to scoring 60 points. What are you doing, Seton Hall? I know you held Wagner to 28 points, and that's great. But man, they this team just cannot score. Th- I mean, I that you expect that from like the old Big East, right? You were expecting that from like old like Pittsburgh teams when Jamie Dixon was there, and Jim Boeheim and Syracuse and Georgetown and John Thompson the third, like just earlier, like 2004 to 2013, whenever like the old Big East was relatively intact and had like 16 teams. And you expected that, but like Seton Hall is really reverting back to those days because they like again against like Hofstra and Fordham with losses, they failed to score 60. They failed to score 50 in the Hofstra game. Shaheen Holloway, uh, you better get back on track. And they did somewhat against Wagner, but again, that's it's not like the upper echelon of college basketball we're talking about here. Gonzaga beating UMass Lowell, what a surprise. This, however, was something that I really have to give Wisconsin fans their bread here. They destroyed Arizona 103 to 88. I know Arizona made it a pretty close game in the second half, but good lord. Man, Arizona, geez, especially with Caleb Love not having a very good game, you were kind of like not really relying on him. But Trey Townsend had a pretty good game. Jaden Bradley with 22, KJ Lewis with 15. But Wisconsin, on the other hand, got 41 from John Tanji, 21 of 22 from the free throw line. I'll talk about the referees a little bit later on because I have some stuff to say about both this game and the Indiana South Carolina game. And oh my God, Max Klesmit and Steven Crowell, with them being the returning guys, obviously losing AJ Storr and Chucky Hepburn. Chucky Hepburn transfers to Louisville. AJ Storr transfers to Kansas. I didn't really expect Wisconsin to be this good, but good lord. Like, I mean, they looked really good. They were hitting just bonkers, like long distance three pointers. Like, these were just like mortars that were going in. And yeah, I mean, I got to give Wisconsin a lot of credit because they proved me wrong, like being like kind of in like the mid tier Big Ten, not like, uh, not close to playing in the first day of the Big Ten tournament level, but like not just like second round action. But I mean Wisconsin, if they keep this style of play up, I mean Greg Gard's got a pretty good squad going here. For whatever Wisconsin fans want to say about Greg Gard, I mean he's still having that consistency that like continuing to just make the tournament, play the same styles as Bo Ryan did. But again, Bo Ryan made two Final Fours and he made a national championship game. So again, Greg Gard's got a lot more to do if he still wants to like be up to par with that level. But again, I think this Wisconsin team's just going to still be very consistent now. I mean, they proved me wrong. I thought Arizona was going to win this game, and for a while it looked like they did, coming back from what was it, 18 down to tie the game, and then Wisconsin they may have even taken the lead. No, I actually, um, no, I think they just tied it. But they they just Wisconsin played really well after that and put up 103 points. It like should be illegal for Wisconsin to score that many points, especially against number 9 Arizona. It's just like with that style of play and however long I've been watching college basketball, Wisconsin just doesn't score 103 points very often. And I mean, they did, I think a few times during like the Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker teams, but the other team I got to give some props on is Texas A&M. I thought Ohio State would win this game, and I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. Now, obviously, Ohio State just didn't get a great game from Bruce Thornton, and really, they didn't have a ton of help aside from Micah Parrish. and John Mobley. They were the only other two in double figures. And even with a guy like Aaron Bradshaw, only 3 for 10, over 3 from three. That's not going to cut it, especially against a Texas A&M team that still has Wade Taylor. And again, I still agree that during this time, and again, rankings don't really matter this time of year. I still don't think this week that Texas A&M should have been ranked, but they're going to be ranked definitely now next week, and they should be because they beat Ohio State 78-64. Like that's just really good. And especially when you can beat a team that's ranked higher than you this time of year, like it gives great momentum, especially in the SEC that's going to be really competitive. So, again, great win for Buzz Williams' program. And they're probably going to make it back to the tournament this year at this rate. And again, scoring 47 points against Ohio State's defense is not nothing to scoff at. So, and then today you have, Creighton wins again, Ole Miss wins again, Kansas wins again. Who could have seen that coming? And Duke holding Wofford to 35 points. And they definitely needed it after losing to Kentucky. That just needed to be a game Duke had to have, and they were going to have it. I don't think that was ever in doubt. But winning by 51 points is pretty good, I gotta say. Uh, yeah, poor Wofford, 14 points in the first half. Good lord, dude, what the hell? And Cooper Flag didn't have a great game, but they got some. They just have so many balanced scorers, like Tyrese Proctor with 15, Caleb Foster with 13, Con Canuple freshman with 8, Isaiah Evans with 14, 4 for 7 from three. Again, Duke's just really balanced. And, for whatever people say, like, I know people are going to criticize Cooper Flag for uh, kind of choking in the Kentucky game, but he still was a big reason why Duke was even ahead in the first place. Like, Cooper Flag's going to be fine. Let's just make that very clear. Um, yeah, so Duke, yeah, Duke for Duke, it's gonna be fine. You all have nothing to worry about until you play some random ACC team. And once conference play starts, they always have like one or two losses early on the road, and just like one like weird loss for some reason. It's really weird with Duke. It feels like every year this happens, or every other year this happens, where they have like a bunch of early losses, or not, like three early losses, one's at home, and then they just steamroll the rest of the regular season. It just feels like that's going to be the type of year again. But then Duke will like play really well and get like a top four seed, and maybe even a two or three. I don't know if I'd say they're a one seed just yet, but again, we're in November. Calm down. Let's not be too quick to judge teams based on like early season play. So, because we all know that is that has worked so well in the past. We clearly know that judging teams and saying this team's going to the Final Four just because they beat this team by like 30 points, and that's not going to work. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. But also wanted to give a quick shout out to Tyler from Tennessee. He is a big Tennessee fan, and so currently, right now, Tennessee taking on Georgia in football, and they're currently down by 4, but they've played pretty well. And got to give a shout out to Tennessee. They're going to compete in basketball in the SEC, be competitive, I should say, in the SEC, because they always are. Rick Barnes has, got that team to pretty much be what he wants it at this point. They play tomorrow against Austin P. Let's go P. Let's go P. I tell you, just just like weird slogans for different teams. All right. But let's get on to Indiana basketball, Indiana men's basketball. We don't talk about the women's basketball team as of not as of right now. We'll get to some scores in a little bit, but Indiana wins 87-71 against South Carolina. Their first big test, I guess, not really, because I don't think South Carolina is going to be that good. Obviously, with Colin Murray Boyles, Nick Pringle, and Morris Agusuk. Morsagusa had a really good game. 18 points. Like he just shot the lights out from three, but they got cold at the worst time, and Indiana really took advantage. Colin Murray Boyles fouled out with only 2 points and 6 rebounds, and just didn't really make much of an impact. Like I was really I really thought Colin Murray Boyles would have a much better game than he did, and it didn't happen. I mean, Indiana took him completely out of the picture, not just with good defense or whatever, but he just was playing with foul trouble the whole game. That's what happens when your best player gets in foul trouble. Like you're gonna have results like this. And in this case, it's a 16-point win for Indiana at home. Got a little bit hairy there at the end. South Carolina made a pretty good effort to get back into the game. I give them a lot of credit, but Indiana just has a lot of talent to put up 87 points against South Carolina, a Power Five team. It is what it is. And Miles Rice with 23 points, the Washington State transfer. Mike Woodson, I gotta tell you, like a lot of Indiana fans are eagerly like wanting Mike Woodson's head on a pike, and I just that level of just hatred for a head coach is just so I get it. Like I have my criticisms of Mike Woodson as well, whether it be the weird stagnant offense that he can run sometimes and his substitution patterns being a little weird and kind of like failing to adapt to the college game as opposed to running an NBA team. I get it. Man, like this we are just coming off the Archie Miller era, right? We in the last couple years, I mean, the last year of Tom Crean especially, but the last few years of Tom Crean were not roses and peaches, except for like the last Yogi Ferrell year, which was great. The last time Indiana's made a Sweet 16, and uh, he's made the tournament twice. Mike Woodson has made the tournament twice. That is something that Archie Miller cannot say. He didn't make the tournament once here, and I'm sorry, give Mike Woodson a little bit of patience and be and like this year's team is really good. Like again, Miles Rice, Kanan Carlisle with 12, the Stanford transfer, kind of really some of his very nonverbal moments. I was agreeing with the broadcast here and with like just some of the things that he was doing, and like he had a half court lob that I think it was Galloway. Was it Galloway? I can't quite remember who he was trying to lob it to, but it ended up going in, and he had a couple of those shots that just kind of went in randomly. He had 12, Miles Rice with 23, as I said. Mackenzie Mbako, first round draft pick in the NBA. He's a first rounder. 17 points. Malik Renew with 13. Umar Ballo didn't have a great game. Still had 7 and 13. 5 of 9 from the free throw line, which is better than 50%. Got to give it to you there, Umar Ballo. Trey Galloway with 11. Bryson Tucker, freshman, only had 4, but he had 3 rebounds and still played pretty well. Feel for Luke Goody, man. He's got to have one fall at some point. He had a 3 fall, but it didn't count because the whistle had already blown, and I was like, no, Luke, no, I'm not giving up on Luke Goody, man. He's gonna be fine. Just this is a team that has a lot of talent on it, and at some point, and this is going to be one of the good things about playing a bit of a cupcake schedule aside from like the battle for Atlantis is to have guys like Tucker and Goody really kind of flesh themselves out offensively and really just like find their identities. And that's the hope, I'm not even though like you can say, some guys aren't playing up to par like Gabe Cups or Luke Goody, like just give them some time, man. It's game 3 of the season. We still have a lot of non-conference regular season to go, and we have a lot of Big Ten season to go. And just have things kind of like fall into place. It's not going to happen immediately, but when it does, it'll be fine. It will be fine. And I'm just asking for some patience from my fellow IU fans who just seem to have this like hard on for trying to get Mike Woodson fired. And it just doesn't make any sense. But another thing that IU fans definitely have a hard on for is the IU football team, which we will get into momentarily. But Really quick, I wanted to touch base on the Yukon North Carolina women's game that happened in Greensboro Coliseum. This was a game that, again, I thought North Carolina definitely had a good shot to win coming into the game, but when you were watching it, it just was clear that Yukon was such a better team, and they were up like 20 early on. They were up like 38 to 18, and Paige Beckers had like 15 points in the first quarter. She ended up with 29 overall, and Sarah Strong with 14 and 13 with 6 assists as well. That's, whew, man, that's really good. And I mean, for North Carolina, just like Lexi Donarski never really got going. I mean, they just really didn't have a great game against UConn's defense. No one really like stepped up all that well. And when you're looking at UConn, you have Paige Beckers with 29. That's just really hard to stop. And they were without like several really good players. Like Azzy Fudd didn't play, and they had a couple others that like really tested their depth, and they still beat North Carolina on a neutral floor by 11. Like that's still really good. So I may have to reconsider like Paige Becker's going out titleless. And again, I still think USC is probably, or South Carolina being like the two favorites right now. But UConn, I know it's like the meme where it's like, I apologize, I wasn't familiar with the game with your game, but I am familiar with UConn's game, and I'm still like, no, Paige Becker's is gonna leave titleless, and she still might, but and that's the prediction that I am gonna stick to. But this game kind of makes you reconsider reconsider some things, especially like this is a type of game that UConn probably would have lost last year, and they won it this time around with not relative ease because North Carolina did make a game of it, but even still, this was a game that UConn pretty easily won. So again, you UConn fans, you got a lot to celebrate about in men's and women's basketball because your men's team is still going to be really good. Your women's team is still really good. You all are in the top five in both those polls. So, spoiled brats. uh, I'm a little bit jealous, but no, you all have a great basketball program in both the men's and women's team, and you all should be very, very grateful for that. And I'm sure you are. A lot of you are. And no hatred, no disrespect towards you all. But it's just like, God, I wish I had that, But speaking of teams that are really good, and kind of leading into my next segment here, Indiana football, as I said, 10-0. They were off this weekend, but it feels like they got a win regardless because Curt Cignetti signed an 8-year extension, doubling his pay. We don't know like the exact details of it yet, but it's like yes, it just feels so good. It just feels so good for Curt Cignetti. I'm so happy the man's getting paid. I'm so happy that the renovations are happening in the stadium and everything. They're really committing to the football program being better, and I'm so happy with that. And it's not like taking anything away from the men's or women's basketball teams. I know the women's team isn't doing very well right now, but again, I still have faith. I still have faith in Terry Morin. Just deep breaths there. So, with that being said, there are a lot of people online that are clearly daunted. They clearly are part of the mad about Indiana crowd. I love that meme, especially from the Crimson Quarry. It's just such a fitting attribute to be just mad about this. And there's a lot to criticize Indiana University for. I'm one of them because especially like during like the campus protests and everything, and they were bringing the cops out, and there was a sniper on the roof and all of that. It just like that's that sort of stuff you like I get like being critical of. But there are people, even like IU fans, are like, oh, we'll never be able to keep Curt Cignetti. And look what happened. Curt Cignetti's staying. let's go. And I'm just like so happy about that. It just really, really feels good as an Indiana football fan after living through the Kevin Wilson era and the Tom Allen era. I know there were a couple good years in both eras, but to have it at this level with Curt Cignetti in year one, 10-0, and he gets re-signed, it's just it feels so great. But as I alluded to earlier, there are some tweets that we will be dunking on here. I'm not gonna list the names of the people that I will be dunking on, but these tweets are out here. You can probably find them. You've probably already seen them if you are part of this crowd of people. And this is just the first segment of this. So hopefully it'll be a little more. I'll be a little more diverse with my selections for dumb tweets to dunk on, and not necessarily being Indiana centric. But this is the type of stuff that really makes me happy. And this is the type of stuff that I really feel good about analyzing, critiquing, and also like, you dumb shit. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's just really, it just makes me feel good to dunk on just bad tweets. It's literally that Succession episode for any Succession heads out there who are, it's like the bad tweet, bad tweet, bad tweet. I think that was it season 3 or season 4 when that happened? I can't exactly remember. I need to rewatch Succession at some point, man. If you all are looking for good TV and you have not seen Succession, watch Succession. It's such a great show. And it's not for everyone. I get it, but I cannot recommend it enough for people who just like political satire and like good comedy drama and just a great writing. It's so well written. It's so well acted. The dialogue is great. Just cannot say enough good things about Succession, except for the fact that Dasha is, for people who don't know, Dasha Nekrasova is, well, she's part of the show for a while, and also Nicholas Braun has some allegations against him. But other than that, it's still a really great show. And you know, problematic points aside, I still recommend it. So let's get started here with, again, I'm not gonna list the names off of these people because I don't like, because there's a slight chance that they're not like just scummy, but at the same time, these tweets are fun to dunk on, and we love just mocking these people. So this person says this is a Louisville fan, and while I definitely have more, beef with fans of Kentucky and to a certain extent Purdue, but again, I don't, that's just like the whole IU sucks chant that they do, and which is like super annoying, and while they're getting blown out by 45 against Notre Dame. So, but this Louisville fan is quite upset about Indiana's lack of scheduling and especially the buyout where they originally had Louisville on their schedule and then that changed. That isn't the fault of Curt Cignetti. I mean, the schedule was made before he got here. So that's not really the problem. But again, I mean, admittedly, as an Indiana fan, a tougher schedule might have been fine. But at the same time, you look at their schedule and they played the national champion in Michigan, the runner up in Washington, because they moved from the Pac 12 to the Big Ten. And again, they still play their big rivalries like Michigan State and Ohio State and Purdue, and Nebraska was supposed to be halfway decent this year with Dylan Raiola. And of course, we all know what happens when Matt Rule has a say on any team. And but this particular fan is not very happy. He says, I don't think folks understand how impactful Indiana's buyout this year truly was. Louisville could have, and most likely would have, beat Indiana in, in this season. Yes, yes, we clearly love living in a fantasy reality where my team beats your team in a game that did not happen. Love to hear it, man. Can't wait to read the rest of this. Replace the Austin P. Jacksonville State win with a 9-1 IU squad. Well, here clearly not factoring in that Indiana in your world would still be 10-0 and you would still have another loss on your schedule. So, and Louisville's 6-3 record would be looking much better. Yes, yes, of course. We all love to picture what a 6-3 record would still look like in this current college football playoff form. We should be facing a very winnable three-game stretch to go 9-3 and a genuine shot at an at-large bid to the playoffs. I'm not saying Louisville would get in the college football playoff with a 9-3 record, but I think conversations would be a lot different right now had IU not gotten scared. Oh, buddy, I'm sure you're the daunted one here. I'm sure Louisville is the daunted one because the day after this tweet gets sent out, Louisville loses to a 2-7 Stanford team. I Yeah, it's so good. You're in your fantasy world, you're thinking about beating up this 10-0 team, and when your team couldn't even like beat 2-7 Stanford. Oh, dude, that is gold. Like I'm just personally like I personally never got it, right? Like I never grew up in this fantasy world where like if you know I beat this my team beats this certain team or they play a different schedule or whatever you have for your insane fantasy world about your own team, right? I just never got that level of thinking because to me it's like playing your schedule that you have and putting your yeah, I mean it just playing the teams on your schedule and not worrying about like like granted would I have liked to see a bit of a tougher especially non-conference schedule, sure, yeah, I mean that's fine, especially with Indiana men's basketball. I wish they scheduled better. Like that's not up for debate. Like they have a very weak aside from South Carolina, which again like maybe not even that like that brawny to begin with, but especially aside from the battle for Atlantis, they don't really play anyone. And that's frustrating. I don't really mind early season losses to tough teams. I would rather them play a team like Arizona or North Carolina or Kansas again. Like that would be nice to have, and they could play Arizona in the battle for Atlantis. They could play Gonzaga in the battle for Atlantis. Like that could still happen. What I'm saying is though, like especially for non-tournament action, you want those early big games to happen because it not only boosts your strength of schedule and it gives your team experience, especially if you're on like a neutral court. It really helps you come tournament time. Like and it also just helps conferences in general, and especially in the conference net rankings and everything. It really would make more sense to start playing tougher schedules. But again, when it comes to Indiana football, Curt Cignetti took a 3-9 team and has currently won 10 games. They're 10-0. Hashtag 10 win Indiana. Or hashtag 10 win Indiana. Sometimes even I struggle saying it. Sorry. But this next one is it's short but sweet from a particular maybe slightly obsessed video game college football fan because this person forgot to take into account the difference between real life and video games. He kind of had the world blended a little bit because this person said Curt Cignetti is about to be sorry, let me start over there. Curt Cignetti is about to get paid by a huge program. He's turned around Indiana in an offseason and made them legit. This was tweeted on October 19th, and Curt Cignetti just got paid by, yeah, he's got paid by a pretty huge program. The Hoosiers, baby! The Hoosiers! Are you? Are you? Ah, yes! 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 Happy Indiana fan. He reads in quote tweets or in quotation marks. We'll see 2 to 3 years from now. Oh, buddy, I can't wait for those next 2 to 3 years. I can't wait for that to happen. Oh, man, you just that really it, that really like just makes me so happy, right? That a team like Indiana can be turned around by a coach like Curt Cignetti. And it's not like, obviously it's a little bit different with someone like Mike Woodson who had to inherit the Archie Miller era at Indiana men's. And it's taken him a while to sort of build up this program, but in year 4, like it's looking up. Like they're like currently the second best team in the Big 10 and aside from behind Purdue. And I mean that right now because again things can change and other teams can leapfrog, both Indiana or Purdue. Like that's totally that's totally valid if that happens. And oh boy, you just think about going from the Tom Allen era where you had a team with a 3-9 record. They lost 10 games even during the Michael Penix era. They That was the year that they just kind of fell apart after the COVID year and it was the vibes were really bad. And I get why Curt Cignetti was pissed when he first took the job and really didn't see much enthusiasm from the fans because we didn't know, especially the fans and the students that are still there at Indiana. I totally get why he was mad at like the lack of enthusiasm, and that's what led to the Purdue sucks, but so does Michigan and Ohio State. Go IU. And like that fueled a lot of energy into this program. And also like the Google me, I win. And it, it makes me so happy to see this man finally get paid and to finally just it just feels so nice as an IU fan and to know that it's not over after this year because again I was one of those fans that was a bit bullish on the fact that Curt Cignetti might take a different job, and obviously fans of different teams were hoping that. I did see some Ohio State fans say that they would like to replace Ryan Day with Curt Cignetti. Boy, how are you feeling now? How are you feeling now? Ah, you you just have to like hand it to those people who are very just very delusional in the way they think. Being currently the number 2 team in the country for Ohio State football and still being like, well, Curt Cignetti could take the Ohio State job if Ryan Day, starts losing a little bit more. Well, not really going to happen now. There was also I can't find the tweet for the life of me anymore. It was there, but I don't see it anymore. Okay, well, oh, come on. I know it's here. I know it's here. Oh yeah. Well, here's another one that I wanted to find. Not the account that tweeted it, but W underscore B underscore Rick on Twitter. He's a very big IU fan. One of the bigger IU accounts, who tweets a lot and it has some true bangers. But someone replied to him under a tweet where he was complimenting IU's offense, especially with their point guards and their just better ball movement and the better passers that they have on this team and not having to rely on like Trey Galloway and Gabe Cups to run an offense. This person tweets, "This offense is hot garbage." Sorry, you can't see it. And someone tweets under him or replies to him with just daunted. And that's what I want to like just say to everyone who like just wants to trash on IU, just any sort of athletics, you're daunted. You are daunted. Oh yeah. Okay. No, I'll say this person's name. Ohio Tate, Barstool Tate. Of course, it's from Barstool. Why? Who? Why would we expect anything more? Ohio State tweets: Indiana is officially in a lose-lose in a couple weeks in Columbus. If they beat Ohio State, Cignetti is the coach of the Buckeyes by dinner time. In the way of Tim Robinson in I Think You Should Leave. You sure about that? You sure about that? Even if Indiana loses to Ohio State, which is again, I wouldn't be heartbroken if they lost to Ohio State on the road. I just want the game to be competitive, right? And yeah, it just feels nice for those accounts to just it just like eat a pile of crap for especially for Barstool accounts. I'm glad this podcast is not affiliated with Barstool because I would have been fired by now. and oh yeah, great news for whatever school Signetti leaves for. Going to be great transfer portal additions. Ah, ah, ah. Just so nice. It's so nice to see these accounts kind of like eat crow for predicting this. And again, if there's the 2% chance that Signetti actually like leaves, like it'll be heartbreaking and this podcast will be deleted because the table would be turned on me is essentially what would happen. And I'm really frustrated about not being able to find the one tweet but it was basically some fan. I can't quite remember what team they were a fan of, but they were saying like my sources are or he was like my sources are that Indiana's revenue is not enough to keep Curt Cignetti around. I've applied two sources to your argument. Please respond. It's like the libertarian frame of arguing with people online. Just like here are my sources and why you should pay so much attention to me. I realize all my impressions are like of the comic book guy, but why wouldn't they be? And to that it's like two, like your sources are must be really great. Like even though they're telling you one thing, like another thing ended up happening that completely disproved your two sources, quote unquote. And these sources that you claim to know a lot about are kind of leading you astray and leading you to look like a dumbass online replying to these tweets that are like just ratioing you out the back for like no pay at all. You're essentially falling into this trap of doing the straw man argument of like, I have two different sources that say Curt Cignetti is going to be leaving. You should trust me on this, bro. Again, it's such a libertarian argument. I don't even know if this person's a libertarian, but it's just still funny. There was like this whole thread that was like 40 tweets long of just him arguing with people online, just saying like my sources are actually very correct. And it just it turns out the exact opposite happened. It just is so great to dunk on accounts like this. And yeah. So those are the four tweets I had. And the last thing I want to get to wrap up here, I mentioned this briefly earlier on in the podcast, but ref ball is back in full swing, especially it was in the Wisconsin Arizona game. The, the refs just really make the game about themselves, and it is so tiring to see. No one comes for the ref show. I'm sorry, no one does. You're not you're important, but you're not important in a way that like you shouldn't be dictating the outcome of the game. What you should be doing is like trying to at least call the game as best as you can. And sometimes bad calls happen, and sure that does happen, especially in the Wisconsin. Oh my gosh, there were so many fouls, like ticky tack fouls that were called on I mean, even though like Wisconsin got a bulk of the free throws, there was some stuff that was called on Arizona as well that or in favor of Arizona that was like, are you sure about that? Again, kind of going the Tim Robinson route, but I just don't want to watch a game like that, man. I really don't. And again, the Big Ten refs are back in full swing. I mean, there were a couple of really questionable calls in the South Carolina Indiana game, especially like the whole double technical. And it just feels like Indiana has gotten more double technicals called on them than like any other team. And maybe it is like just watching other teams, you'll get the same reaction. But Indiana's gotten so many double technicals in like the last, gosh, even in the final Tom Crean years, there was a lot of that happening. And I mean, I already mentioned this in episode one where it was Kansas versus Michigan State, and Kansas was just getting a ton of calls going their way. And like, I just, I mean, again, I understand as a principled leftist that it's like, refs should be paid better wages and like shouldn't have to like rely on it, rely on other jobs to like make their living while also doing this, which, sometimes they could call like two, three, sometimes four games at a time when it's like, the NCAA tournament or different things of that nature. And but at the same time, you just also have to get better refs and you have to get better at your job. Like, I only go so far as to like, like refs should be, hanging around because of like their track record or their, experience, but also just get better. Like you don't have to be, like you shouldn't, there shouldn't be like Teddy Valentine or Larry Scarato. I think that's his name, Larry Scarato type referees, where you're just like, oh my God, you just roll your eyes at those guys calling games. And again, I know like also like SEC referees can be pretty bad too. I know it's not just a Big Ten thing, but I guess I mean Arizona, welcome to the Big 12. I mean, if that's what you're going to be getting, like games against Kansas, welcome, welcome, my friends. You are in for a rough one. But with that being said, I think that's all I have for today's episode. This has been the longest episode so far. It clocking in at 52 minutes. So again, appreciate y'all listening to the podcast again, and wherever you're listening into your podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple, or anything. I feel like I've gotten it distributed pretty well. Don't know why I say distributed very weirdly there, but anyway, I can do the English. Trust me. Trust me, bro. It's been a pretty good run so far, even though this is only episode two. I mean, this is the third overall episode, but like, the second main episode. And so far, I gotta say, like, I'm liking what's been happening so far. So again, tell your friends about the podcast. If you like what you hear, again, please like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're watching this on a podcast, please rate it 5 stars. And again, I appreciate, some of the people that have already, subscribed into the podcast, whether it's, family or friends. I appreciate y'all. And I appreciate, any new listeners tuning in, and if y'all do the same thing. And again, it's been really nice. I've also, one last bit of information, I have set up a Patreon, but there's no membership. There's no paid membership yet. That's not going to be coming for a while, but because I, actually want to build up an audience first before I do any of that. So, with that being said, again, if you enjoyed the pod, just, again, d- just do the suggestions that I've proposed to you all, and hopefully you've gotten some entertainment out of my rambling and ranting as well. With that being said, hope you all have a good rest of the night or good rest of the day wherever you're listening from. So take care and love you all. So bye bye.